A brown-eyed boy with light brown hair addresses his passion. Ms. Elizabeth. It looks like he wants to offer her something. So it is. After a few seconds, the young man asks, "Will you marry me?" Elizabeth, a girl with bright blue eyes and blonde hair, is shocked by such an offer. The blonde tries to hide her confusion with a fan, but it doesn't work very well. Elizabeth understands that making the young man wait a long time for an answer is not very polite on her part. The girl puts the fan aside, puts her fragile palm in the boy's, and smiles at him. Yes. The aristocrats present in the hall are shocked by what just happened. They excitedly whisper to each other, "Ah, did the fourth prince just propose to Elizabeth Owslet?" The fact is that the chosen one of the prince is a simple countess. Some believe that the bride of the heir to the throne should be a girl with a higher social status. However, the majority does not agree with this opinion. Elizabeth is a very beautiful and sweet girl with impeccable manners. She is the very embodiment of lightness and elegance. Her deep blue eyes reminiscent of the ocean, fine blonde hair that shines in the sun, always a friendly smile. All this attracts young aristocrats. Poorly lit room. On a small table lies a purple pillow. On it there is an almost transparent ball with the image of young Elizabeth. A mocking laugh is heard. A man dressed in a white uniform decorated with gold is conjuring above the sphere. The stranger watches as the fourth prince proposes to Elizabeth. "Countess Elizabeth Owslet," the man says thoughtfully. The girl has sparkling blue eyes. She is telling her fiancé about something. The stranger rests his hand over the bullet and says a spell. "No matter how many men offer you to be their wife, I will not allow it to happen." The glass breaks. The Owslet estate. It is a medium-sized two-story building with a blue roof. Around the house there is a small garden with several trees. Elizabeth can be heard shouting from the estate. What does it all mean? The girl clutches a piece of paper in her hand and after a few seconds throws it on the floor. The young countess is very angry. She grabs her hair and swears. Yes, now Elizabeth is not at all like the shy and friendly girl she was next to the fourth prince. At the screams of the blonde, two servant girls and governess Elizabeth, a plump woman with brown hair, come running. She asks her pet what happened. Elizabeth clenches her hand into a fist and flashes her eyes angrily. "I can't believe it." The girl says that Baron Carme recently confessed to her. The blonde was very happy about this and was already thinking about the wedding. But today she received a letter from the Baron with an offer to leave. Elizabeth waves her hands. He didn't even have the guts to come and say it in person. The governess smiles reassuringly at the girl and says that she should not speak ill of people no matter how much they annoy her. Also, throwing letters on the floor is a stupid tone. The servant girl removes a sheet of paper. Elizabeth lowers her head. Bilyavka admits that she did not do very well. The governess offers the girl to drink some tea to improve her mood. Elizabeth agrees. After a few minutes, another maid rolls a table with dishes into the room. The maid pours the blonde a cup of fragrant drink. "I don't think it's likely," says the governess, "but I hope you wouldn't throw a tantrum if you heard it from the Baron in person." Elizabeth replies that of course she wouldn't do that. The blonde raises a cup of tea to her lips. "I knew that I wouldn't be able to do anything with the fourth prince. After all, we have different status." Not long after the divorce with the prince, the son of the Marquis of Carbaron married a blonde, but this relationship did not last long either. Young Carbaron abandoned the blonde. The same story happened with the second heir of Count Goldspear. A young man with gray hair and eyes of the same color told the girl that he did not like her. Then the blonde began to meet with the third heir of the Marquis of Whitehall. This young man was sweet but frivolous. Shortly after the start of communication, he informed the blonde about his unreadiness for a relationship. Now the girl was abandoned by the son of Baron Carme. Elizabeth sighs in annoyance. Now nothing can cheer up the girl, neither tea nor her favorite strawberry cheesecake. Elizabeth pushes the saucer away from her. "This happens regardless of their status or family. They're breaking up with me after a week of dating." The governess listens carefully to her pupil, trying to understand why all her chosen ones behave this way. Elizabeth's voice pulls the woman out of her thoughts. The blonde puts her hand to her chest. "Tell me honestly, am I really not that pretty? Or maybe I'm the wrong kind of woman who doesn't know how to communicate with men?" Elizabeth sighs and hangs her head. Tears appear in the eyes of the governess, which the woman hastens to wipe with a handkerchief. The governess feels sorry for her unfortunate pupil. Due to constant divorces, the girl lost faith in herself. The woman decides to cheer her up, and she does it unexpectedly and sharply. Elizabeth shuddered when she heard the exclamation, "Lady!" The governess clenches her hand into a fist and asks who dared to say such nonsense to the young countess. The woman's eyes turned black with rage. "No one," Elizabeth says quietly. She is a little frightened by the behavior of the governess, who was the embodiment of kindness and calmness. The woman says loudly that there is no one in this empire who can match Elizabeth. This is true. The appearance of the young countess is very attractive and unusual. In addition, the girl is the heiress of a famous noble family whose roots go back several centuries. "There is simply no better bride in the world than you," says the governess enthusiastically, imagining a blonde in a blue wedding dress with a bouquet of blue roses in her hands. The woman puts her hand to her chest and falls silent. Elizabeth's eyes twinkle. Is that true? Not to say that the young countess is a selfish person, but she likes praise. The governess replies in a serious tone that even if Elizabeth has some fault, a week is too short a time to be separated. The mention of numerous short-lived relationships hurts the blonde. The sparkle in the girl's eyes turns to sadness. The blonde again asks herself why she is so unlucky in love. The governess gently smiles at Elizabeth. "Just forget about them. I'm sure that fate is preparing you to meet a more worthy man." Elizabeth looks at the governess with wide eyes for a few seconds and then smiles widely. The girl thanks the woman for the much-needed support. However, the blonde puts the empty cup on the saucer. It will be a very long way. The sun peeks into the room through tall, oak-framed windows. The girl looks at the sky. Yes, it will be really difficult for her to find a good husband, if only for the reason that Elizabeth cannot meet with men whose title is lower than the Duke. The governess is interested in the blonde's opinion of Duke Vanderbilt. It seems to the woman that Elizabeth and this man were an ideal couple. However, the blonde does not think so. "Well, what are you talking about? Duke Vanderbilt is one of the most famous generals of the empire. There is no person who does not know about his exploits. Even I understand that I am unworthy of him," says the blonde. The Duke is unlikely to pay attention to the young, albeit very beautiful countess, if the whole world is at his feet. The governess is surprised by Elizabeth's answer. "Really, I do not think so." Elizabeth sighs. The girl does not understand. The governess is saying this seriously or is just trying to cheer her up. After a few seconds, the woman tells Elizabeth that she has something to offer her. The blonde immediately turns her head to the governess. The girl wonders what this woman has in mind. Will he offer her another male candidate? But no. The governess smiles. "If you are still troubled, maybe I should go to the temple and pray for you." "To the temple?" Elizabeth asks. The girl completely forgot that opposite the Oslet estate there is a temple of incredible beauty, with tops decorated with gold. The blonde looks at the majestic building and smiles. The girl puts her hand to the window. Why not? Elizabeth hopes that the prayers will help her find love. The governess tells the girl that she is going to go to the Temple of Melphia. This god is known as the patron of happiness and success. The woman assumes that he will be able to clear the blonde's aura. "Would not be bad," Elizabeth cheerfully answers. The governess smiles. She is glad that after all she was able to calm down a little and cheer up her dear lady. Suddenly the blonde freezes in place. It seems that she has an idea. The governess excitedly asks the girl what happened. She raises her hand to her chin. A minute passes. The blonde twinkles her eyes and tells the woman that she wants to go to the temple with her. The governess is surprised by such a desire. Previously, the young countess hardly visited churches. Besides, it's the end of the year. Many people come to the temple. Breaking through the crowd will be quite problematic. The governess worries that these visits will take a lot of strength from the girl. The blonde woman raises her index finger. That's the point. The woman does not understand anything. Why would her lady make life difficult for herself? Elizabeth's behavior worries the governess. But everything is fine with the blonde. The girl tells the woman the details of her plan. Perhaps God will respond to the prayers of the one who endured a lot of suffering to get to his temple. The governess says uncertainly that it sounds logical. The blonde looks at her imploringly and folds her hands together. The girl really wants to go to the temple. The woman sighs and smiles gently. As you say, there will be a lot of people, that's why. Please stay away from me and the handmaidens. The blonde runs up to the governess and hugs her. Thank you very much. The woman was somewhat surprised by the girl's expression of joy. Look, don't regret your decision. The governess releases herself from Elizabeth's embrace and approaches the door. The woman says that she is going to ask which of the maids will be able to go to the temple with them. She leaves the room, carefully closing the door behind her. The young countess clenches her hands into fists with joy and exclaims, "Wonderful! Now I will be able to attend banquets again." The girl looks at the stack of envelopes lying on the table. The blonde mentally tells herself that she wants to go to the temple to finally find a beloved man who will not leave her. The girl approaches the table and starts sorting through the envelopes. They have letters with invitations to banquets. Of course, it is not surprising that the young and beautiful countess is called to such events. Elizabeth reads one of the invitations. By the way, some banquets are often visited by princes. The girl puts the letter away. She would love to go to some aristocratic party, but she can't yet. The fact is that most of the invitations came from blonde peers, pretty and frivolous duchesses and countesses, and Elizabeth knows perfectly well what they all want. The words of the young aristocrats that they will help the blonde to cheer up are lies. These girls just want to embarrass her. Elizabeth was often flirted with by boys whom other young ladies liked. Therefore, it is not difficult to guess how aristocrats treat a blonde. If she appears at the banquet alone, she will simply be laughed at. Aristocrats are not shy about discussing Elizabeth's personal life. They will also pretend to feel sorry for the girl, hoping that she will not understand their lies. Elizabeth clutches the sleeve of her dress in fury. She doesn't want to give young ladies a reason to abuse. That is why the girl wants to visit the crowded temple and find there a knight on a white horse who will be able to accompany her to all the feasts. "Mrs." The voice of the governess snaps the blonde out of her dreams. The girl shuddered in surprise and directed her gaze towards the door. She did not think that the governess would return so soon. The woman smiles at the blonde. "Have you already chosen a dress for visiting the temple?" Elizabeth gets up and heads for the exit from the room. "I'll see now." The blonde does not even suspect that a mysterious stranger is watching her with the help of a magic bullet. A man with unruly blue hair and yellow eyes looks shocked. He did not expect that Elizabeth would want to visit his temple. Meanwhile, the blonde has already chosen clothes for the visit. A white dress with a blue bow on the belt. There are several temples in this country. All of them are located in different cities and look accordingly differently. Each temple is named after the god who lives in it. In the Temple of Melpheus, a magnificent structure located in the city of Elizabeth, lives the god Melpheus. And now this god is confused. He does not understand why Elizabeth came to his temple. The man watches the girl, who together with her maids and governess enters the temple premises. A woman shows something to a blonde. "Did she suspect that all her troubles are my doing?" Malfay says, hoping it isn't. The man squeezes the magic ball with his hands, wanting to influence the blonde. But he can't do anything. Melpheus lowers his head. Now he does not feel like an almighty god, but like a naughty boy who was caught in a hooliganism. After a few seconds, the man again directs his gaze at the ball. "Maybe you didn't suspect." The blonde's behavior does not seem strange to Melfay. The girl, as always, laughs and sweetly communicates with other people. She does not even think about any god there. Malfay sighs in relief. Now the blonde is an ordinary person. Like many other people, she has fun. Sometimes she is sad, and of course she suffers because of the absence of a loved one in her life. The only thing that distinguishes her from others is her eyes. Malfay had never seen such bright eyes. They mesmerize a man, entice him. He stares at Elizabeth and squeezes the orb with thin fingers. After a few seconds, it starts to crack, but Malfay ignores it. Now he is only interested in the young countess. A red-haired man enters the room. "You stand for your own again." Malfay sighs in frustration. "Elderberry." The dark-haired man stands up and approaches the man. "And you came?" Malfay finds it difficult to show hospitality when he is distracted from his work. Meanwhile, in the temple, several women stand near the statue of Melpheus. They are to this god begging for at least a little happiness and success for themselves. Elizabeth watches them. By the expression of the girl's face, you can understand that she is not very satisfied. The blonde flashes her eyes angrily and turns to the governess. "We stood among the poor," the girl begins. "After a few hours we reached the altar for the aristocrats, but I don't see a single boy." The governess looks around the hall. A woman sees a smiling man praying to Melpheus. No, it definitely does not suit a blonde, too old, and not good enough for such a beauty as Elizabeth. There are no other male persons here. As the blonde said, the women themselves who came to pray for the well-being of their families, and, of course, for their own. They all look somehow strange. No, blissful. The governess raises her index finger and tells the blonde in an instructive tone that most aristocrats send their representatives to the temples. You've never been here either, the woman adds somewhat reproachfully. She does not like that the young countess treats the temple as some kind of ball. It doesn't change anything, says the blonde. The girl does not believe that there are not at least a few handsome men in the country who are so grateful to the gods that they visit their temples on their own. The blonde imagines several such men and sighs in annoyance. The governess flashes her eyes and smiles at the girl. We are going to give God our prayer scrolls. The woman asks the blonde if she wants to go with them. Visiting a place like a temple is a special event, and all the rules must be followed. The blonde, who is busy with her thoughts, looks around the hall again, hoping to see some handsome man. The governess notices the blonde's lack of interest in religious matters and says that the girl can stay here. Suddenly, Elizabeth notices several men in white uniforms. The girl opens her eyes wide in surprise. Knights? How did I not notice them before? The blonde tells the governess that she will wait for her and the maids here. The woman goes to the door that leads to the room of sacrifices and messages to God. Before going inside, the governess asks the girl not to go far. She agrees. As soon as the door closes behind the maids and the woman, Elizabeth smiles widely. It seems to the girl that one of the knights will be able to become an ideal gentleman for the banquet. Elizabeth imagines holding the hands of a handsome young man in a white uniform. Yes, the blonde is still a dreamer. It's just a pity that her dreams about men almost never come true. But if you look closely at Elizabeth's behavior, you can understand that now she is not looking for love, but rather for a gentleman. A person who will be able to go to the banquet with her. The girl begins to carefully examine the knights, trying to understand which of them could fall in love with her. The blonde twinkles her eyes and smiles at the boys, but none of them reacts. Elizabeth is not upset. After all, if she is rejected by knights, she can find a suitor among the faithful or even priests. True, it is not a fact that the latter will agree to go to the banquet. The blonde folds her hands in a prayer gesture. I'm begging you, Melpheus. The girl looks at the ceiling. Elizabeth's eyes are full of hope. She is ready to do anything for someone to fall in love with her. The girl asks Melfi to share her luck with her. After all, it's not such a difficult task for a great god, is it? Elizabeth smiles, hoping to win God's favor. Melfi snorts. Elizabeth's requests and her desire to find a suitor irritate him. The patron saint of happiness already has plans for the young blonde. He doesn't want it to fall to some fool. Heard. Elderberry distracts the man from the contemplation of Elizabeth. The red-haired god reminds Melfi that the blonde asked him to share his luck. But I know. The presence of Elderberry annoys the patron saint of happiness. Dark-haired suggests that he return to his temple. Believers are probably waiting for the red-haired god there. But Elderberry doesn't care. The man says he has another job. In general, the red-haired man, despite his bright appearance, gives the impression of a prudent god. I will duly review the prayers offered to me and fulfill my duties as a god of war. Elderberry tells Malfeeve about his plans. He then points a finger at the dark-haired man and says that he has a problem with his head. The patron of happiness shuddered in surprise. Elderberry reprimands the man for staring at Elizabeth when crowds of people come to his temple daily with their petitions. Melpheus doesn't know what to say. Haven't you forgotten about your duties? Elderberry flashes his eyes angrily. He is very dissatisfied with the behavior of the patron of happiness. Yes, Malfi had never been one for responsibility, but now his behavior crosses all boundaries. The redhead tells the man that the gods should listen to the prayers of mere mortals and then send them blessings. Elderberry grips the collar of Malfi's suit with his hand. And what do? The man hopes that the god of happiness will finally stop hovering in the clouds and start doing his job. But a simple educational conversation is not enough for this. Malfi still needs to be scared a little, and the redhead knows about it. Using your power to ruin a girl's relationship, he exclaims. Elderberry says he is ashamed to be the friend of such a god. Malfi takes the man's hand and gives him a displeased look. So what? The dark-haired one scratches the back of his head and tells the red-haired one that he is being louder than usual today. Elderberry is indignant. I just said everything I kept inside. Lately, Melpheus has really been behaving strangely. He hardly communicates with anyone, does not fulfill the wishes of the faithful, watches Elizabeth day and night. It is interesting that when this girl was a goddess, the man paid no attention to her at all. Meanwhile, Elizabeth is talking to some handsome knight. Malfoy looks away. Elderberry crosses his arms over his chest and sighs. She should have come down from the heavens and become a mortal, as you took an interest in her. Malfoy turns to face his friend again. The dark-haired one is angry because Elderberry was able to bite him. Eventually, Malfoy gives in. I really can't take my eyes off her. The red-haired man puts his hand on the table. I didn't even have to interrogate. Elderberry is pleased that his friend has now actually admitted that he has feelings for Elizabeth. This is how adult adequate people behave, or rather, gods. However, it seems we were wrong. Melpheus is not going to confess to anything. He says he is just watching the goddess. The man is convinced that Elizabeth needs to be controlled. In a few months, this girl fell in love with 5 boys. Malfoy says she needs his care. Elderberry realizes that his friend is just making excuses. The red-haired man says that if Melpheus had not interfered, the young countess would have settled on 1 boy. The dark-haired man's eyes twinkle. It looks like he's going to turn on Elderberry now. The redhead is quick to change the subject. He directs his gaze at the magic orb and says that the blonde's life as a goddess has left its mark. Guys are constantly courting her. For example, now the girl is saying something to the knight. The guy, charmed by Elizabeth's beauty, smiles widely at her. He tells the blonde a joke. She laughs sweetly. Melpheus sharply turns his head in the direction of the ball. The man raises his eyebrows. He was distracted only for a moment, and the girl had already caught someone. The patron of happiness examines the knight. A tall young man with dark hair braided into a braid and gray eyes in which devils dance. Yes, this knight is really handsome, like all the former Elizabeths. The blonde touches his hand. Malfoy clutches the magic orb with both hands. The dark-haired man is shaking with rage. He doesn't understand why a blonde can't just enjoy a luxurious life without falling in love with flamboyant aristocrats. It seems to Malfoy that if he had not intervened in time, all his beloved girls would have hurt her. The thin glass of the magic ball begins to crack. But these are little things. Melpheus will fix it. Now the man is much more interested in the interlocutor, Elizabeth. Hey, you boy! Malfoy turns to the knight. You'd better stop. God notices the sparkle in the blonde's eyes. The dark-haired man smiles ominously and tells the young man that he will be doomed if he does not stop flirting with the young countess. The young man would have left Elizabeth at once if the threats of the mighty god had reached him. However, he cannot hear Malfoy. The knight puts his hand to his chest. After a second, he starts laughing. It seems that Elizabeth has taken over his heart. Enraged, Malfoy says that he will personally make the boy's life hell. In the temple, Elizabeth stands with her eyes closed not far from the altar. The girl is very satisfied with the result of communication with the noble knight. He turned out to be so sweet and gallant. After a few minutes, the governess and maids return from the prayer room. "Ma'am," says the woman, smiling, "you are in a great mood." Elizabeth replies that it is indeed so. The governess, the maids, and the blonde head towards the exit from the temple. It seems that quite a lot of time has passed. The number of people in the shrine has decreased. Elizabeth sparkles with blue eyes, folds her hands in a castle, and tells the governess that she has found the perfect gentleman for herself. Intelligent, courageous, polite, and educated, all these traits are combined in one person. Yes, the knight from the temple seems to be a very good match for the blonde. Elizabeth, the maids, and the governess returned to Oslet Manor in the evening. The road to the temple and back tired the blonde, so now the girl is resting in one of the rooms. Elizabeth is sitting on a chair by the fireplace. The girl warms her tanned legs from a long stay in the cold in a small bath. A governess approaches the blonde with a towel in her hands. "So you met the knight of the temple?" asks the woman Elizabeth. "Yes," the girl smiles dreamily. "His name is Mushuk. He is a very friendly young man." When the girl offered this guy to go with her to the banquet, he happily agreed. Fortunately for Elizabeth, he turned out not to be a boring knight, but a young man who loves various activities. The governess asks the blonde if she plans to meet Mushuk. The girl says that she is just going to attend the banquet with him. However, maybe they will become a couple later. Bilyavka is unsure about this, so she does not build castles in the air in her imagination. The girl squints sweetly. After a few seconds, she jumps up and tells the governess that she wants to go to the New Year's Eve tea party in the Imperial Palace. Elizabeth asks the woman to prepare clothes for her. The governess is surprised by the girl's decision. A few days ago, the blonde ignored invitations even from her closest friends, and today she is going to the Emperor's palace. "Are you sure?" asks the woman Elizabeth. "I thought you didn't want to attend events like this because of your peers." The blonde gets her feet wet on a fluffy towel. The girl says that it was so, but now she has a boyfriend, so there is no reason to worry. Elizabeth clutches a lock of her hair in her hand and shines her eyes triumphantly. The blonde is proud of the fact that she was able to find a boyfriend in such a short period of time. She sits down on a chair for the governess to wipe her feet. The woman says that she does not understand Elizabeth's behavior. "Are you so ashamed to appear in public without a gentleman?" asks the governess to the blonde. "Why not ask the young gentleman to accompany you? There is nothing like that here." The girl makes a funny frown and purses her lips. She tells the governess that she does not understand anything. White, the young countess's brother, is the last person on earth with whom a girl would go to a banquet. Besides, all the aristocrats will make fun of her. Bilyavka decides to explain to the governess what an aristocratic banquet is. This is a real battlefield for young ladies. Beauty, origin, manner of speech, attitude towards others. All these are criteria for evaluating aristocratic women. Who evaluates? Of course, young gentlemen and their rich parents. Each of the girls tries to show herself from the best side. And what can Elizabeth boast about? The fact that she was dumped by 5 guys? What could be worse than that? In other words, do you want to change the way you think about yourself? It seems that the governess understood why Elizabeth was so desperately trying to find a suitor for herself. The girl blinks and says that her brother White is, of course, very popular among young aristocratic women. But going to the banquet with him is not the best option. The girls will gossip about Elizabeth and make fun of her. Like she is so unlucky in love that she brought her brother to the event. Elizabeth felt sick when she imagined the looks of her rivals. The girl clenches her hands into fists and says that she will not allow this under any circumstances. The blonde looks shy, but in fact she really likes to be in the center of attention. She is used to everyone, both women and men, admiring her beauty. A girl doesn't want to lose her ecstatic looks just because she doesn't have a boyfriend. Elizabeth strives to remain as elegant and incredible in the eyes of others. "I can't let some envious girls smear my honor," says the blonde. The girl is going to prove to the aristocrats that she can find a worthy husband. That is why finding a partner for the banquet is an important part of preparing for the event. Elizabeth puts her hand to her chest and smiles sweetly at the governess. The woman sighs. "Well, your truth." The blonde clenches her hand into a fist with joy and sparkles in her eyes. The girl is happy that the governess, a person dear to her, understood her. The woman smiles at Elizabeth. "It's time to sleep. I'm sure you're very tired today." This is true. The road to the temple and back, as we already know, was quite difficult for the young countess. All the same, the girl who traveled in luxurious carriages all her life was not used to long walks. The blonde waves to the governess and wishes her good night. A woman walks slowly down the corridor. And yet I wonder why all the men broke up with the ladies so quickly. There are no valid reasons for this, thinks the governess. She approaches the window and looks at the sky. Be that as it may, the woman hopes that the knight Mushuk will not leave the blonde, like other aristocrats with whom she met. Meanwhile, in the temple, the floor of the room is covered in blood. Mushuk, young Elizabeth's chosen one, was wounded in the shoulder with a sword. Parubik is shocked. He does not understand how this could happen. Mushuk settles on the floor. Other knights immediately run up to him. One of them, a boy with dark red hair, turns to the frightened recruit. "Did you do that?" The reason for such aggression of the redhead is clear. After all, it was this recruit who was next to Mushuk when everything happened. The boy says that he did not touch the knight. They were just walking. They discussed events in the temple, girls, and banquets. Suddenly, the ropes holding Mushuk's armpits broke. The dark-haired knight's sword fell to the floor, and then he rose above the floor and flew at Mushuk. The knight was so shocked that he did not even have time to step aside. The blade of the sword pierced his shoulder. The red-haired man grabs the recruit by the collar of his suit. Do you think I'll believe this delusion? There are tears in the eyes of the frightened boy. He does not know how to prove his innocence to him. Fortunately for him, Mushuk himself intervenes in the conversation. The knight, clutching the wound on his shoulder with his hand, tells the red-haired man that the recruit's story is true. The sword actually went through me, bouncing off the floor. The dark-haired man barely moves his tongue but continues to say, he is not guilty of anything. The new recruit looks at the redhead with wide eyes. He lets go of the knight and approaches his wounded comrade. After all, now is not the time for quarrels. You need to save Mushuk before he dies from blood loss. The blonde knight, who was sitting next to the dark-haired one all this time, says that the wounded man should be taken to the infirmary. Melpheus is watching the knights. Yes, the sword incident was his fault. God runs his finger on the magic bullet. He says this is just the beginning. You will surely regret, Malphay's eyes flashed an unkind fire, that you got in touch with Elizabeth. No matter how dreamy and absent-minded the patron of happiness is, he fulfills his promises. We are transferred to the temple again. The knights approach the infirmary, but the door of the room is closed. All the doctors have gone somewhere. A short boy with dark blonde hair tells the knights about it. The red-haired man shouts as if the rules state that at least one person must remain in place. The boy, scared to death by the sight of blood and pressure from the formidable knight, begins to cry. Through sobs, he says that all the medics were taken away by people from the palace. The blonde knight sighs in annoyance. What a failure! Mushuk clenches his teeth, trying not to cry out in pain. The recruit asks the boy if he can heal the wounded. Red-haired answers in a guilty tone that he is a student who does not know anything yet. The red-haired knight leans over to the boy. Can Mushuk at least rest on one of the beds? The student says that the abbot of the temple took all the room keys with him. The red-haired man does not hold back and starts shouting that in such a case he will just kick the door now. The boy begs him to stop. Mushuk sighs heavily. He mentally turns to Melpheus. Oh, Almighty, tell me, where have I sinned? Suddenly, something similar to enlightenment comes over the boy. He opens his eyes wide. An image of Elizabeth appears in Mushuk's head. I am not worthy to be with the young countess, says the young man. After that, Mushuk starts to fall. The knights try to hold him back, but to no avail. The young man lost control over his body. Fly, shouts the redhead. The wounded knight falls to the floor. Very soon, consciousness will leave him. Bilyavai and the recruit ask Mushuk to hold on. The redhead asks the student if there is a blanket here. He wants to warm the wounded. Still, the floor in the temple is quite cold. Mushuk mutters something under his breath in a half-conscious state. It is connected with the young countess. The young man assumes that the meeting with Elizabeth deprived him of luck. The wounded knight's eyes slowly close. His consciousness falls into the abyss. Morning at Oslet Manor, Elizabeth's room. The girl opens her eyes wide. It seems that she had a nightmare. The blonde sits on the bed, trying to recover. Her heart is beating like crazy. In horror, the girl saw the wounded Mushuk. He looked very believable, and it scares Elizabeth. Scary to shivers. The girl stands up sharply. I must visit the temple, says the blonde. She decides to do it right now, without waiting for the governess to wake up. The blonde goes out on the balcony. The morning sun illuminates houses and buildings. There is not a soul on the street. Most people are still sleeping peacefully in their homes. Elizabeth grabs a branch with her hands and carefully removes her feet from the railing. The main thing is not to fall, says the girl. Bilyavka slowly descends the big tree. After a few minutes, she is on the ground. The girl sighs in relief. She was able to leave the estate without waking anyone. Now it remains only to reach the temple itself. The girl feels in her pocket a small bag tied with a black rope. Elizabeth always carries it with her. The girl keeps money in her bag just in case. Little can happen. The young countess quietly approaches the exit from the estate and opens the heavy iron door. Fortunately, the girl had a key. The blonde runs through the streets of the town. She is very worried about Mushuk. Something tells the girl that her dream was not a dream at all, but a real vision. About half an hour later, Elizabeth runs to the Temple of Melpheus. From the outside, this building looks as usual. The blonde approaches the cleaning lady. Say hello to her. Also, the cleaner tells Elizabeth where the hall for morning prayers is located. Bilyavka thanks. She bites her lip. The girl still feels anxious. Elizabeth walks deep into the prayer hall. There she sees several Templar knights. They blush when they meet the eyes of the young countess. Mushuk is not among them. Melpheus, the patron saint of happiness and good fortune, once again uses his magic orb to watch over Elizabeth. He is, to put it mildly, shocked when he sees what the girl finds in his temple. The man rests his hands on the table. What is she doing there at such a time? "You have already begun to hallucinate," says Elderberry to a friend. "Why does she come to the temple so early?" "No, this is the real Elizabeth," Malfi answers. The girl looks around, still hoping to see Mushuk among the temple knights, or at least to find out if something happened to him. Meanwhile, Melpheus thinks why he came to the temple with Elizabeth. "She's hardly my devoted follower," he says in his mind. Suddenly, Malfi's eyes widened. He assumes that the girl decided to visit the temple for the sake of Mushuk. The only question is how she understood that something was wrong with the dark-haired one. The man flashes his eyes angrily. He tried so hard to protect Elizabeth from this guy. He even penetrated Mushuk's mind and assured him that he was not worthy of Elizabeth. But the blonde continues to seek adventure and expose herself to danger. Malfi grits his teeth in rage, feverishly thinking about how to prevent Mushuk and the girl from having a cute conversation. The man looks at the magic orb and sees that the wounded knight is lying on a hospital bed. He still hasn't regained consciousness after the night incident. And this is only for the benefit of Melfev. Doing something with an unconscious guy will be quite easy. The man carefully examines the room in which the wounded man is. The door attracts the patron of happiness. Melpheus decides to break the lock. A second, and a slight creaking of the door is heard. The man easily coped with this task. Malfi looked at the boy, checking to make sure he was unconscious. The knight does not move. "Fine," says the patron of happiness. He pulls out a small purple pouch made of a fine quality fabric from his suit pocket. It has a seal in the form of a creepy face. Malfi pulls on the rope while grinning evilly. After a moment, a dark purple, almost black vapor flies out of the bag. The man directs her to the magic bullet. "Like this," says the man. "Melpheus got this strange couple in the demon world. She must penetrate into the consciousness of the unconscious knight and cause him horror. In that case, even if Elizabeth can get into the room, Mushuk won't wake up. He will be tormented by little imps that will be formed from a demonic couple. Thus, the young countess will leave the temple with nothing. Melpheus is proud of his plan. The man decides to see how his dear Elizabeth is doing. He opens his eyes wide when he sees a blonde walking down the temple corridor with some dark-haired priest. He tells her about Mushuk. A dark-haired man and a girl approach one of the rooms. The knight, unable to take his admiring gaze away from the blonde, touches the door handle. "Mushuk rests here." The girl thanks her guide. Malfi clutches a bag of dust in his hand. The man is angry with Elizabeth because she talked to the dark-haired priest. Meanwhile, the blonde tries to open the broken door. Malfi notices that the guide knight has left her, so she decides to stop watching for a few minutes. Now the patron of war has more important things to do. He should write down the name of the dark-haired person with whom the blonde just talked in his blacklist. Malfi adds all the men who court the young countess or even just look at her. Suddenly, the patron of happiness hears the joyful exclamation of the blonde. "The door has opened!" God turns his head towards the magic ball and sees Elizabeth thanking the priest for being able to fix the door. The boy blushed from the warm words of the girl. Malfi presses the pen so hard that the ink smears all over the page. "First the knights and now the priest?" exclaims the man angrily. He is annoyed not only by the naivety of the young countess, but also by the behavior of his subjects. Once they swore allegiance to God, but now they are running after Elizabeth's skirt. Malfi grits his teeth in rage. "Don't go near him," shouts the patron of happiness to the girl when she enters the infirmary. But the young countess does not hear Malfi. She, not suspecting anything, sits down by the knight's bed. The girl lowers her head and says softly, "God, I can't believe you're so badly hurt." Elizabeth feels guilty about the young knight's condition, although she herself does not know why. Mushuk moans softly. Freaks do not give him peace. The boy sees the horror, but he cannot wake up. Elizabeth is very sorry for the young man. The girl would gladly help him. The only problem is that the blonde does not know how to do it. Suddenly, one demon notices Elizabeth. It smiles sinisterly. Evil is going to attack the girl. Bilyavka, on the other hand, continues to sit in place, not suspecting anything. Malfi yells at the imps not to jump on Elizabeth. However, they do not listen to the patron of happiness. As the creatures approach the girl's hair, Malfi calls out loudly, "Stop! Who told?" He doesn't want the freaks to touch the blonde, because then she will be tormented by horrors. Just like Mushuka, the patron of happiness cannot allow this to happen. He opens the bag and with the help of some kind of spell, drives the demon out of the infirmary. When they are in the bag, Malfi sighs in relief. God is a little disappointed that Mushuk will soon wake up and start talking to Elizabeth, but nothing can be done. In any case, it is better for the blonde to exchange a few words with the knight than to suffer from horrors. Mushuk starts to shake his head. In this way, the boy gets rid of the remnants of unpleasant dreams. After a few seconds, he opens his eyes. Parabok feels pain in his shoulder, but it is no longer as unbearable as immediately after the injury. "Mr. Mushuku," Elizabeth notices that the knight has regained consciousness. "How do you feel?" From the look of the girl, you can understand that she is really worried about the young man, and not only because he is unlikely to be able to fulfill his promise regarding the banquet. No, Elizabeth just has a good heart. The knight asks the girl what she is doing here. The young man sits down on the bed and immediately grabs his bandaged shoulder. The wound makes itself felt. The guy clenches his jaws in pain. He hopes that the girl did not notice his weakness, but it is not so. Excited Elizabeth puts her hand forward. "Don't overexert yourself." "Sorry," the young man says confusedly. There is silence in the room. After a few seconds, Mushuk collects his thoughts and tells the girl that unfortunately, he will not be able to accompany her to the banquet in this state. Elizabeth opens her eyes wide and freezes in place. "Again," runs through her head. The girl guessed that the wounded young man was unlikely to go west, but his words still hurt her. More precisely, not his words, but the repetition of failure in love. The girl lowers her eyes for a moment. The blonde is in despair. No matter how hard she tries to find a good guy, it all ends the same. But the girl is not going to show her emotions to Mushuk. After all, it might upset him, which Elizabeth does not want at all. She smiles at the young man and wishes him a speedy recovery. Also, the girl says that he cannot worry about the banquet. Malfi, as usual, watches the girl. Now the patron of happiness is in a great mood. The man clenches his hands into fists from joyful excitement and twinkles his eyes. Yes, -1. Malfi is happy that he was able to protect Elizabeth from another handsome fool. Suddenly, Elderberry bursts into the room. He runs up to his friend and hits his head on the table with all his might. "What's the matter, Downey?" The dark-haired one screams. 20 minutes later, Malfi sticks a plaster on the affected forehead. It hurts. The man doesn't really understand why Elderberry treated him like that. Well, yes, Malfi was constantly following Elizabeth, but this did not concern the redhead. The man tells Elderberry that it would be good to learn how to control his power. Who would have thought? In the eyes of the god of war, an evil fire flares up. No matter how powerful a god you are, if the servants find out what you are doing, you will be finished. Servants are beings who follow the gods and report on their work to the main god. Malfi says that no one will know about anything, unless, of course, Elderberry himself tells. "Idiot!" exclaims the redhead. "If you go too far, they will guess everything themselves." Elderberry tells the man that Elizabeth is the cause of all his troubles. Because of this young countess, he cannot work normally. Elderberry offers the dark-haired man to give the girl peace. All the same, she is no longer a goddess. The blonde became a human because she was expelled from heaven. "So what?" Melpheus asks. "Think with your head, they didn't kill her just like that." The red-haired man is annoyed by his friend's behavior. It seems that the girl has captured not only Malfay's attention, but also his mind. In principle, it is not surprising at all. When the blonde was a goddess, she had her own fan club. Before the banishment of Elizabeth, the supreme god received a bunch of letters with requests to leave the girl in heaven. Malfi impatiently asks the redhead what he's leading to. Elderberry sighs in exasperation. Our gracious Lord mercilessly sent Elizabeth to the world of men. The pleas of other gods not to do this did not stop the Lord. The redhead crosses his arms over his chest and says that he has never seen the supreme god so angry. Elizabeth's banishment was and remains one of the greatest mysteries in heaven. If I'm not mistaken, it's still unknown why she was kicked out, says Elderberry. Melpheus agrees with his friend. Although the patron of happiness was not interested in the life of Elizabeth the goddess, he would not be against finding out what she was up to. But the Supreme God did not explain anything to anyone. He said only that the blonde broke one of the laws of heaven. And despite that, the red-haired man puts his hands on his waist. You continue to interfere in her affairs, risking your own career. But I understood. Milfeve was fed up with the red-haired man's lectures. The man wants the god of war to get out of here and not interfere with his business anymore. But Elderberry is in no hurry to leave his friend. He walks up to Malfi and grabs him by the hair. Understood, you say? Then why did he turn his magic bullet back on, huh? The redhead points to the neatly folded scrolls on the nearby table and reminds Milfeve that he has a more important job than controlling Elizabeth's life. The dark-haired must fulfill the requests of his subjects, and the sooner Malfoy does it, the better. In a few days, he has to report to the bishop. Malfoy slaps his forehead with his hand. From the confused expression on his friend's face, Elderberry understands that he has forgotten about the reports and about his duties in general. The dark-haired man tries to pretend it's not the case at all. I can at least now report on my work, says the man. However, Malfoy is a bad actor. The dark-haired man's eyes betray him. I was wrong. Elderberry is as serious as ever. The dark-haired man realizes he's been bitten, but continues to play the part anyway. What are you talking about? Elderberry approaches the man. I was hoping you'd come to your senses and start working. The god of war is very angry with his friend. After a few seconds, the redhead explodes in anger. But your behavior is only getting worse. Look at yourself, you've gone crazy with this Elizabeth. Elderberry takes the dark-haired man's magic ball in his hands and approaches the window. Gay, what are you going to do? Malfoy is no joke scared by the red-haired man's words and actions. The god of war raises his hand with a bullet above his head. He says he's helping Malpheus. Elderberry wants to get rid of what made his friend so irresponsible. The dark-haired man rushes to the feet of the god of war. Stop, please, your throw will shatter the ball into pieces. The redhead tells the man that he will stop if he takes a bath. Also, a dark-haired person should shave his stubble and clean his room. The patron of happiness reluctantly agrees to fulfill the friend's demands. Market. Sellers try to sell their goods as profitably as possible to concerned workers. The crowd, the noise, the smell of sweaty human bodies. This is the atmosphere of this place. The young countess is here too. Several hours have passed since the girl's conversation with the knight, but the blonde is in no hurry to return home. Anyway, the governess must have already noticed that she ran away. Elizabeth can already imagine how the woman got scared and angry when she saw that her pet's bed was empty. The blonde is sad because another gentleman left her. What's wrong with me? The girl once again asks herself this question. Constant failures really made Elizabeth very insecure. Someone's shout breaks the girl out of her thoughts. Please excuse me. She immediately directs her gaze forward. The seller of the bread stall is holding the hand of a little boy. He stole a piece of bread from the man. Keep silent, shouts the seller. Excuse me, what else? Elizabeth makes her way through the crowd, silently watching this picture. The seller takes out a huge knife from his pocket. You stole my bread. Tears appear in the boy's eyes. Of course, he is very frightened by the man's behavior. Is he an orphan? People whisper among themselves, he is unlucky. Someone says that the seller has a terrible character. He's still that miser. He will choke on a piece of bread. The two men decide to pretend that nothing happened. They move away from the bread bench. Elizabeth looks after them. She does not understand how adults so easily left a child in trouble. No, the girl of course understands that stealing is bad. But this boy looks like he hasn't eaten in days. Is the seller really sorry for him a piece of bread? Meanwhile, the man says in a pretending kind tone that any crime should be answered. The seller wants to cut off the boy's hand so that he can never steal again. No need, asks the child. The boy tries to move away from the knife, but the seller does not allow him to do so. Let it pass. Elizabeth can't look at it anymore. She will never forgive herself if she does not stop abusing the child. Suddenly, someone grabs the girl's hand. Elizabeth turns her head to the side and freezes in place. A fair-haired man with green eyes is standing in front of the girl. I'm sorry, he says, but it's too dangerous for a fragile girl like you. Elizabeth waves her free hand. But if you don't do anything, trouble will happen. The girl tries to break free from the boy's strong grip, but she can't. The seller squeezes the boy's hand tighter. The child looks at the knife with wide eyes. Despite his age, the kid understands that he will die from blood loss if the man does what he is going to do. People continue to stand still and discuss the situation. They are not at all interested in the fate of the homeless orphan. The blonde stranger tells Elizabeth that she can call the bazaar guards. However, the blonde should not interfere in this at all. She may suffer at the hands of an angry seller. Elizabeth lowers her head and asks the young man if he could let go of her hand. He immediately fulfills the girl's request. "Bad things," shouts someone from the crowd. Elizabeth and the stranger look at the seller and the child. The man puts the boy's hand on the box. The bastard flashes his eyes angrily. The little one starts screaming, not giving up hope for rescue. Elizabeth pushes her way through the crowd. "Gay, stop!" shouts the fair-haired man. However, the blonde does not listen to him. She simply cannot allow a man to cut off a child's hand. The girl clenches her hand into a fist out of anger and shouts, "Stop!" The crowd stops the homonyms. All people pay attention to the young countess. The salesman clenches his jaws and rudely asks Elizabeth what she needs. The scoundrel is unhappy that he was distracted from an important matter. The blonde approaches him. She does not care at all that the seller is holding a knife in his hand, and in vain. The man raises the weapon to the girl's face. "Don't interfere in men's affairs." These words make Elizabeth laugh. This scoundrel calls abusing a small child man's business. The boy looks at the girl with wide eyes. The little one is worried about the life of the blonde. The fair-haired man approaches the bread counter. His expression is serious and calm. The old man is going to protect the girl, but she is able to stand up for herself. The blonde takes a few steps away from the seller and crosses her arms over her chest. "One more word, and you'll regret contacting Countess Oslet." People in the crowd start whispering again. None of them guessed that the brave blonde belonged to an ancient aristocratic family. One of the men says that the Oslet family runs this town. "Sorry," says the seller quietly. The abomination immediately changes his tone. "You probably don't know." The man tries to smile at the blonde. "Theft is a crime that is punished quite severely in our city. Criminals are cut off their hands." The blonde drills the seller with a cold look of blue eyes. The girl understands that this scoundrel wants to deceive her. He thinks that aristocratic women know nothing about real life. But it is not so. Elizabeth is familiar with the laws of her city. Yes, in some cases thieves can cut off their hand. However, this is too cruel a punishment for a little boy. The blonde raises her eyebrows and tells the seller that she will take the child with her. "What?" the man exclaims. The bastard cannot believe the blonde's words. Like the boy himself, he even stopped crying out of surprise. Molly had never heard of aristocrats taking small orphans from the street, and also an orphan thief. Elizabeth smiles smugly and says she will give the boy a job. "If you still wish to cut off his hand," she adds, "I must warn you that I will take it as a threat to the servant of the Oslet family." The man grinds his teeth in rage and helplessness. The seller would gladly kill this girl right now, but he knows what punishment will await him for this act. "I don't think it's worth explaining what the Oslet family can do to you." The blonde seems to be reading his thoughts. Now the girl looks very serious and cold. The crowd laughs at the seller. And how many conversations were there? It's only possible to offend the weak, miserable miser. The man glares angrily at the people. He will show them who is miserable here. But not now. Now the seller needs to somehow defend his honor and recover the money for the stolen bread. The little one clenches his hand into a fist out of excitement. The boy is afraid that the seller has invented a new punishment for him, more cruel than a severed hand. Fortunately, this is not the case. "Ma'am," the man begins in a feigned polite tone, "if you hired this boy, you must pay for what he stole." The seller is quick to add that he doesn't mean anything of the sort. People just have to take responsibility for their subjects. A fair-haired man approaches Elizabeth. He takes out some silver coins from the pocket of his expensive cloak and throws them on the ground. The stranger hopes that this gift will make the seller leave Elizabeth and the boy. So it is. The man, no longer caring about his honor, falls to his knees in front of the fair-haired man and begins to collect coins until the rich stranger changes his mind. "You won't earn that much even in a month of work," says the stranger. "Take the money and get away." The merchant looks up at the fair-haired man. You can see hatred in the man's eyes. Hate hidden under fear. The blonde's green eyes flashed. "That's a lot smarter than arguing with an aristocrat and her servant, isn't it?" The seller picks up the last silver coin from the ground. The man pushes the boy away from him, stands up sharply, and returns to his bread bench. Today, the scoundrel's working day ended earlier than usual. Elizabeth asks the stranger why he gave the silver coins to the seller. The stranger says that such people never forget evil, so it is better to appease him. The humiliated seller gives a coin to a certain worker who approached the counter. The blonde tells the girl that if he hadn't given the scoundrel money, he might have attacked her one day to take revenge for the incident with the boy. In general, the stranger is not very pleased with the recklessness of the blonde. What was she thinking when she left the estate without a maid escort? The girl lowers her eyes. She becomes ashamed of her behavior. Courage is courage, and you also need to think about safety. The girl admits that in the current situation, paying the seller was the best decision. Elizabeth thanks the boy for his help. Parabik is somewhat surprised. He did not expect that the young countess would admit her guilt. The girl takes out a bag with money from her pocket. She hands it to the stranger. "Please take it, that should be enough to recoup your expenses." The blonde says that there is much more money in the bag than he gave. However, the girl does not back down. "This is my gratitude, donkeys never stay in debt." The blonde puts the bag in the stranger's hands. Elizabeth remembers the boy. The child is sitting on the ground. The girl sits down next to him and asks if everything is okay. The stranger watches the blonde and the child. The boy says that he is fine. The only problem is that he does not know how to thank the girl. Despite the fact that the little one grew up on the street, he behaves very politely. The blonde hurries to reassure the boy. "Nothing is needed, better tell me your name." The girl smiles at the little one and twinkles her eyes. The boy stands up. "Trigger, but I don't have a last name." The stranger decides to intervene in the conversation between the blonde and the little one. "Are you really going to take him with you?" Elizabeth glares at the young man. "Of course." The girl did not like the stranger's question. Still, it is inappropriate to say such things in the presence of a child. Filyavka says that she was always taught to use the power given by her title for the good of society. Elizabeth believes that she did the right thing in this situation. The girl bows to the young man. She says goodbye to him and dissolves into the crowd together with the child. On the way to the place, the blonde tells something to the little one. The stranger looks after the two. The fair-haired man noticed that the girl behaved quite differently from other aristocrats. She gave him her savings, boldly stood up against the merchant, and took the orphan to her. Yes, Elizabeth Auslet interested this blonde. The boy's eyes sparkle. He is sure that he will meet this unusual girl again. Filyavka remembers the stranger's words. "Are you really going to take him home?" The girl must admit that the young man's question was still appropriate. She doesn't even know how her family will react to the boy. Elizabeth and the little one approach the gates of Auslet Manor. There they are met by a butler. He looks surprised. The boy opens his eyes wide. He was impressed by the size and beauty of the count's estate. The boy, of course, knew that aristocrats live a lot, but to so much. The blonde smiles at him. The reaction of the little one amuses and at the same time touches the girl. She is sorry that the little one has never seen a normal life. Elizabeth squeezes the boy's hand to calm him down a bit. The girl opens the gates of the estate. "Let's go, Trigger." Yeah," answers the little one, clutching his patched shirt with his hand. Malfi's room. Elderberry is almost no longer angry with his friend. Nevertheless, he fulfilled his conditions. "You look very brave now," says the redhead. Melfius had indeed changed. He washed his hair and shaved off the hideous unkempt stubble that added to his age. Of course, the young man had not taken a bath to please Elderberry. It was simply the only way to save the magic orb, and therefore the possibility of observing Elizabeth. Malfoy stands in the middle of the room with a towel in his hands. A man does not have to think about what to do. Elderberry has already decided everything for him. Put on a shirt and get to work. The dark-haired man looks at the pile of scrolls and sighs. The Auslet estate. The governess, as expected, reads Elizabeth notations. "When I saw that your bed was empty," says the woman, "I aged 10 years. Elizabeth smiles guiltily at the governess. The woman understands that Elizabeth was very worried about the night Mushuk, so she could not wait for the maids to wake up. But to bring home some boy and ask to give him a job, the woman's voice breaks into a scream. This goes beyond all limits. What were you thinking? Elizabeth suggests the woman talk about it a little later. The girl does not want Trigger to feel like an unnecessary animal who causes trouble for everyone because of the words of the governess. In addition, first you need to bathe and feed the baby. Hardly he ate himself a stolen piece of stale bread. It is very important for children of this age to eat well. Please, governess. The girl directs a pleading look at the woman. Elizabeth hopes that she will not be able to refuse her. All the same, the governess is a very kind person. You just have to be able to persuade her. The woman freezes in place. The look on Elizabeth's face confuses her. After a few seconds, the governess says, "Okay, so be it." Elizabeth smiles charmingly at her. "I knew you'd understand me." The girl puts her hand on Trigger's shoulder. Now the blonde is going to take the little one to the bathroom. The governess looks after her mistress and Trigger. The woman knows that Elizabeth saved the boy from a cruel baker, but you can't just bring orphans to the estate. The little one looks back at the governess and smiles sweetly at her. The woman mentally notes that the boy can become like the son of an aristocrat if he takes care of his appearance. This thought gives rise to an absolutely ridiculous assumption in the head of the governess. And what if Elizabeth was so heartbroken over her failures in love that she decided to raise her boyfriend herself? Maybe that's why she took this boy to her. If you work on his manners, 10 years from now he will turn out to be a good aristocrat. The woman puts her hand to her forehead and almost falls to the floor. Poor Countess Oslet, how so? Only yesterday we went to the temple of Melpheus, the room of the patron of happiness. Malfay is sitting at his desk, and if it doesn't sound unusual, he is working. A man takes apart prayer scrolls. Of course, he does not like this business very much. Reading the requests of the faithful and reporting on the work on sheets of paper is a boring task. However, Malfay has no choice. It must work for 2 reasons. First, very soon you will have to report to the Supreme God. Second, Elderberry is sitting in the room. The dark-haired one glances at the magic orb. He finds himself thinking that he would really like to watch Elizabeth. The redhead, who was also sorting through the scrolls, noticed that Malfi was distracted. "Hey, don't mess around." The patron of happiness says that he does his work in good faith and does not even think about hacking. The man is really trying. He neatly draws almost every letter on paper. However, even now, the dark-haired man cannot stop thinking about Elizabeth. He puts his hand to his head and sighs. For some reason, the dark-haired man imagines that some fool is courting the young countess. "Do you really like her that much?" Elderberry suddenly asks. Malfay shivers. He says loudly that no one likes him. But the dark-haired man does not know how to hide his emotions. The god of war sighs. Malfay is so in love with Elizabeth Auslet that he cannot concentrate on work. The redhead offers his friend to move in with some guy and confess his love to the blonde. Malfay's eyes widened. He hadn't expected Elderberry to offer him such a thing. The dark-haired man stands up sharply. "What? What the hell are you talking about?" The man is angry with Elderberry. The red-haired god's behavior seems unbearable to Melpheus. And unstable. The dark-haired man points a trembling finger at Elderberry. "Can you hear yourself? First you tell me to forget about Elizabeth, and now you call me to confess to her?" Elderberry's eyes sparkle, and he says that he came to this conclusion after several days of observing the dark-haired man. Malfay freezes in place. He is interested to hear what kind of observations there are. "Just give you a magic bullet," says the redhead, "and you'll be staring at Elizabeth for days. You will forget about everything in the world, even about himself. But at the same time, if you take away the toy from the dark-haired man, he will not be able to concentrate on work. He will be constantly distracted by thoughts of the young countess." Elderberry points a finger at Malfi to himself. "All your desires are connected with Elizabeth Auslet." These words are pure truth. The truth that the dark-haired man was afraid to tell anyone. Feelings for Elizabeth cause Melfief to be jealous of all the girl's partners and worry about her. And this greatly hinders the work of God. The man opens his eyes wide. After a few minutes, the patron of happiness sighs sadly. Maybe he really is acting like a fool. He loves a blonde, but he can't tell her about it because he's afraid. He is afraid that she will refuse him. "Just tell her how you feel." Elderberry's tone softens. No matter how angry the god of war is with his friend, he wishes him happiness. No one knows whether Elizabeth will refuse Melpheus or, on the contrary, accept the affidavit, but it is better than sitting and thinking, "What if?" The redhead rests his hands on the man's desk. "Find out?" Malfoy is seriously considering this option for the first time. Maybe when a man tells a girl about his feelings, he will really feel better. But first, the patron of happiness must finish his work. Elderberry places a box of scrolls on Malfoy's desk. The dark-haired one sighs. "You're just a devil." Estate of the Oslet family. Elizabeth is holding children's pants and a shirt. The blonde asks the maid to give these things to Trigger when he gets out of the bath. These are the blonde's brother's old clothes. As things stand, it can be said that he was a very neat child. The servant tells Elizabeth that she will carry out her errand and goes to the bathroom.
The young countess sighs sadly. After all, I have been abandoned again. The situation with Trigger distracted the girl from thoughts about love, but not for long.
The girl approaches the stairs. Tea party tomorrow. The blonde asks herself if she will be able to find someone who could attend this event with her in such a short period of time. Elizabeth heads to her room. "Well, well," the blonde hears, "how stubborn you are, Liz." The girl shuddered in surprise and turned her head to the side. A light-haired, blue-eyed young man in a blue suit comes down the stairs. "If you need a tea party so badly, you could just turn to me." "White!" exclaims the blonde. The boy smiles at her. "Yes, this is Count White, the famous brother of the girl, the dream of many young aristocrats." Tea day. The estate of one of the aristocrats. In terms of its size and grandeur, this building is more like a palace than an ordinary house where a small family lives. At the entrance to the guest hall stands a butler, a medium-sized, dark-haired man with glasses. He welcomes the new arrivals and, just in case, tells them about the structure of the estate. The door opens again. Count White and Countess Elizabeth enter the room. The brother and sister are dressed quite similarly, but not identically. White holds the blonde's arm. Aristocrats pass deep into the hall. They smile kindly at the guests. Elizabeth hopes that today's tea party will pass without scandals and quarrels. People in the hall begin to whisper when they see the young Oslets. The audience is especially interested in White. "Look, this is the young count. He's always so sophisticated." White has a few words with one girl. The guy does not often attend such events, so it is clear why his appearance caused such a stir. One of the aristocrats tells his friend that White gives the impression of a reasonable person who is able to make the right decisions in difficult situations. The aristocrats are sure that White will make a great head of the Oslet family. Elizabeth is already used to the fact that the young count, wherever he appears, overshadows her. In the eyes of others, he is a smart, handsome man. But the blonde knows what her brother really is. She remembers yesterday's conversation with Wyatt. "Turn to you?" the blonde then asked. She was surprised by the sudden appearance of her brother. When he repeated his question about the event, the girl replied that she simply did not want to distract him from his work. However, White did not get it quite right. He immediately pounced. "So you don't want to go with me?" The girl hastened to reassure him. "No, it's not like that." She wanted to say something else, but the blonde didn't let her do it. He happily twinkled his eyes and offered his sister to order a pair of clothes for the tea party. The blonde said that it was easier to buy paired jewelry. After all, no seamstress will have time to sew a couple's suit and dress in less than an evening, but a jeweler will definitely be able to do something. White agreed with his sister. Elizabeth told the governess that she was going to tea with her brother. The woman smiled warmly. "Mr. White takes care of you." Elizabeth understands this, but her brother's behavior still seems a little strange to her. He has a bride. And instead of going somewhere with her, White decided to accompany his sister. The fair-haired man notices 3 young aristocrats, his friends, at the end of the hall. They drink cocktails and discuss something among themselves. "I'll go say hello to the others. I'll be back soon," White says to his sister. The blonde approaches the boys and joins their conversation. Elizabeth takes a fan out of her pocket. The girl's expression is serious, even gloomy, all because the time has come for her to talk with her friends. The girl approaches the table where the young aristocrats are sitting. She is immediately greeted by a girl with dark red hair, dressed in a crimson dress. Several other aristocrats are sitting next to her. All these girls are the main gossips of aristocratic society. Elizabeth tries not to show her disdain for them. "Good day." The table is covered with various sweets. Cream cake, chocolate and strawberry cakes, caramel cheesecakes, everything you could wish for is here. Elizabeth sits down on the only free chair. One of the aristocrats, a dark-haired girl in a purple dress, asks the blonde, "Lady, did you come with your brother?" The countess says that it is. A young lady in a green dress raises a cup of tea to her lips and says that she is jealous of Elizabeth. My brother refused no matter how I persuaded him, explains the aristocrat sadly. The dark-haired woman says that attending such events alone is very unpleasant. Elizabeth also makes herself a sip of tea. Suddenly, one of the girls asks her a provocative question. However, Lady Elizabeth, says the aristocrat in red, smiling mockingly, why did you invite your brother? I heard you had a boyfriend. Elizabeth glares angrily. It started. She mentally sighs. The girl puts her cup on the saucer. The blonde understands that, most likely, she will not be able to enjoy the event today. And all because of this gossip, Sophia. She always brings up such personal topics. Sophia waves a fan. Excuse my tactlessness, but have you been dumped again? Elizabeth purses her lips tightly. The girl is not going to succumb to provocation. After all, she is an aristocrat who, unlike some, cares about her honor. The blonde quickly controls herself. She smiles at Sophia. It's true, it's so hard to find someone you can trust and open up to in our country. The girl in red grits her teeth in frustration and anger. She considers Elizabeth to be a simple girl who tries to shift all the blame for her failures in love onto men. A blonde woman raises a fork with a piece of cake to her lips. Sophia watches Elizabeth with undisguised distaste. The blonde tells the girl that he respects her. These words shock the lady in red. The blonde's eyes sparkle and she puts her hand to her chest. Of course, such a noble lady as you would not believe vulgar rumors. This is an accusation of gossip disguised as a compliment, and Sophia is not so stupid as not to understand this. She stands up sharply. You! The girl is about to say a few kind words to Elizabeth, but she is stopped by the surprised looks of the aristocrats. They had never seen Sophia behave rudely. The young lady clenches her hand into a fist. Ruining your reputation is not the best option. Sophia tries to smile at the blonde and says that she really doesn't believe the gossip. The young lady sits down on her chair. Elizabeth, with the intention of easing the tension of the situation a little, says that the strawberry shortcake is very tasty. The girls do not immediately understand what she is talking about. Elizabeth continues, "You should definitely try it." The dark-haired aristocrat thanks the blonde for the advice. Elizabeth smiles politely. The girl is satisfied with herself. She managed to answer Sophia in a dignified manner, without embarrassing herself or her family. But it's not time to relax. Vilyavka thinks about the behavior of other aristocrats. They have no reason to gossip about Elizabeth. She didn't date their boyfriends. The girl brings another piece of cake to her lips. Isn't it wrong to respond to rudeness with rudeness? I have never had the desire to play with men's hearts. However, Sophia believes that the blonde deserves to be treated badly. The young lady's voice breaks Elizabeth out of her thoughts. I am very jealous of you, madam. Sophia smiles richly and sparkles in her eyes. During this time you have found so many men. Elizabeth freezes in place from such a confession. The girl puts the fork on the plate. The blonde knows perfectly well what Sophia is thinking about. The gossiper wants to remind everyone how many men managed to leave the young countess. Sophia does this with one goal in mind: to anger Elizabeth and force her to embarrass herself in front of others. The lady in red patiently waits for what the blonde will say. Ta takes a sip of tea. Elizabeth says in her mind that she will not let Sophia make her dirty plans come true. The blonde is used to fighting to the end. She smiles at the young lady and says in a calm tone, "It was thanks to constant divorces that I was able to realize how important it is to find the one." Sophia, as expected, is irritated by Elizabeth's words. The bleaching binds the teeth. The girl is thinking about how she would offend the young countess. Sophia did not like Elizabeth since childhood. Little aristocrats were always compared to each other, as peers from influential families. But the most offensive thing is not even that. The young lady cannot forgive the blonde for the fact that she communicated with boys whom she liked, Sophia herself. The girl is waving a fan. White approaches the table. The boy came to see how his dear sister was doing, and he did it very timely. "Liz!" The young man turns to the blonde. She turns her head in his direction. White says he's going home. "How about you?" he asks. Elizabeth tells the barrister that she will go with him. Anyway, she had already discussed everything she wanted with the ladies. The aristocrats, by the way, fell silent and blushed as soon as they saw Elizabeth's brother. Each of them would like to become his girlfriend. Bilyavka gets up and bows. Thank you for the company. Of course, she didn't really like communication with aristocrats, especially Sophia, but etiquette requires being polite. Wyatt takes Elizabeth by the elbow. The brother and sister head towards the exit of the hall, discussing something on the way. The dark-haired one looks after them. Is Elizabeth upset about something? The girl does not understand why the young countess left them so early. Also, she cannot believe that Elizabeth was abandoned more than once by men. After all, the blonde is so educated, beautiful, and sophisticated. Suddenly a crunch is heard. Sophia broke her fan. The girl is angry because instead of gossiping about Elizabeth, the aristocrats admire her. The girl in green notices Sophia's mood and asks if everything is fine with her. The young lady flashes her eyes angrily. She promises herself that she will definitely take revenge on Elizabeth. The Oslet's carriage leaves the estate where the tea party took place. The young count smiles at his sister. A little more and you would have killed each other there. Elizabeth breathes a sigh of relief and thanks the boy for taking her out of that snake's nest. The girl was very tired from having tea with the aristocrats. She barely restrained herself from spilling a cup of tea on Sophia's head. Of course, if the blonde had done it, the scandal would have been inevitable. The girl herself perfectly understands this. Liz, says White somewhat awkwardly, I wouldn't advise you to change husbands so often. I understand that this is not your fault, but still. The guy is very uncomfortable discussing his sister's personal life, but he has to do it. Elizabeth is angry. And you go there. You say it like a governess. Farabach says that it's just a concern. He understands Elizabeth's feelings, but as the next head of the Oslet family, he simply cannot turn a blind eye to her short-lived relationship. The blonde opens her eyes wide. She doesn't quite understand why her brother cares so much. The girl does not spoil the reputation of the family. What is the matter? The young man decides to say directly, Liz, at your age it's time to think about the wedding. To say that the girl is shocked is an understatement. She wanted a serious relationship, but that's all. Malfay's room. The man plays with the magic bullet again. He, like Elizabeth, is surprised by the words of the young count about the wedding. Not even surprising, but infuriating. The dark-haired one clutches the ball in his hands and shouts, Didn't I hear you? He wants Elizabeth to get married! Elderberry doesn't understand his friend's irritation. White just takes care of the girl like a brother. This is absolutely normal, but jealousy deprived the man of the ability to think. Malfay says he has a new rival, Trigger. The redhead rolls his eyes. Grandfather, well, this is already funny. Almighty God is jealous of a little child. But the patron saint of happiness is not funny. He orders Elderberry to shut up with a look. The red-haired man decides to take the magic wheel from his friend until he finally goes mad. Besides, Malfy still has a lot of work to do. Dark-haired, of course, is not at all happy about this. What did you want? Says Elderberry. You are about to have to give an account to the supreme god. Malfy has no choice but to sit down at the table and work with the scrolls. Elderberry gets to work himself. Sometimes the redhead would pull over to see what Malfy was up to. The dark-haired god must be followed. Oslet Estate. Room with Elizabeth's clothes. The maid tells the lady that she has prepared new dresses for her. All of them have different style, color, and purpose. The blonde joyfully claps her hands. They are so beautiful. Only problem is I like almost all of these dresses. I can't choose one. The girl remembers White's words about how important it is for the young countess to find a partner who is equal in status. The old man said this with such a serious expression on his face. It even annoyed the girl. She understands that status plays not the last role in the life of aristocrats. But the blonde does not want to spend her whole life with an unloved person, even for the good of the family. The girl lowers her head. She dreams of falling in love with a man with whom she can live happily ever after, like in fairy tales. Is that bad? Elizabeth shakes her head, trying to get rid of sad thoughts. This is not the time to complain about your fate. Everything is in the hands of Elizabeth. She must help herself, and it would be good if the girl did it before White intervened. A good idea comes to her head. A blonde decides to come to the New Year's party in the most beautiful dress in the world. So Elizabeth will definitely find a handsome aristocrat. 15 minutes later, the girl remembers Trigger. She hadn't talked to him in a long time. Bilyavka decides to ask the governess about the little one. Is he studying now? So, the woman smiles. It seems that she is satisfied with the boy's behavior. Trigger turned out to be an educated and hardworking child. When the young countess told the little boy that knowledge is needed to find a good job, his eyes lit up. The boy promised Elizabeth to study hard. Bilyavka asks the governess to call Trigger when he finishes his studies. The girl wants to order clothes for him. Malfay's room. Elderberry had already left. As you might have guessed, the dark-haired man is watching Elizabeth. The man notes that he still doesn't like Trigger. It seems to Malfev that the little boy is looking at the blonde with loving eyes. All but the dark-haired man would say it was delusional. Trigger's look shows not love, but surprise. The boy is simply not used to life in a rich family, so he walks around the house with his eyes wide open. But you can't prove it to Malfev. The man thinks what to do with the child. In the end, the patron comes to the conclusion that it is not worth spoiling the boy's life yet. Elderberry would be furious if Malfy did something to the little one. Elizabeth looks at the dress. And this does not hide from the watchful eyes of the dark-haired man. It seems to the man that she does it too carefully. Malfay begins to suspect something again. However, this time he luckily stops in time. The man sits down at the table and picks up a pen. He convinces himself that he must work so as not to anger Elderberry. Cabinet of the God of War. The redhead regrets leaving Malfay alone. Something tells him that the patron saint of happiness is now barely restraining himself from reaching for the magic bullet. So it is. Malfay hits the tempting toy with his hand. You can't, the man grinds his teeth. Not now. A report to the Supreme God is coming soon. I have to work. But the dark-haired man cannot concentrate on his work. He touches the ball again. No matter how many men I curse, says Malfay, new fools come in their place. Evening. The sky is full of stars. Carriages go to the imperial palace. All the aristocrats rush to one of the best banquets this year. Palace. One of the rich, a dark-haired man with a mustache, raises his glass. Your Majesty and dear guests, Happy New Year. The emperor and his wife are standing on the stairs. Next to the monarch's family are some of the most influential couples of the empire. Other aristocrats stand on the first floor. They too raise champagne glasses. Let's have a drink, someone says. Music starts playing in the hall. Two noblewomen approach Countess Oslet. Good evening, Lady Elizabeth. The girl twinkles her eyes and smiles. She greets the young ladies and says that she is glad to see them. This is true. The blonde does not mind talking with well-bred aristocrats. Young ladies admire Elizabeth's dress. Unbelievable, as if the starry sky had turned into fabric. Elizabeth managed to choose one of the most beautiful dresses for the New Year's banquet. Filyavka thanks the ladies for the compliment. In general, the ladies at this event are divided into two types. The first type are good girls who consider Elizabeth a role model. And the second type, you yourself know. The young countess hears someone steps behind her and looks around. The blonde does not like what she saw at all. It seems that she, like at the tea party, will not be able to rest peacefully. The blonde is watched by a company of gossiping aristocrats, a plump lady in a blue dress, a fair-haired lady in green, a young lady with a flower on her chest, and Sophia. Elizabeth frowns. Sophia doesn't even try to hide her dislike for her. This is very impolite. Usually, aristocrats behave discreetly even with those whom they hate. The blonde glances at Sophia's girlfriend. They smile defiantly at Elizabeth, also openly showing their disdain for her. They try to look proud. However, their facial expressions are only amusing. These young ladies are Sophia's faithful dogs, no more and no less. Elizabeth sighs. She's not surprised that the gossip girl brought her pack with her. The blonde decides to behave in the same way as at the tea party. That is, to respond to rudeness with rudeness, but so that no one suspects it. The girl smiles at the young ladies and greets them. Lady Elizabeth, says Sophia, have you come again with your brother? I'm so jealous of your closeness. In the girl's words, one feels insincerity and mockery. A plump aristocrat decides to remind everyone about the blonde's failures in love. I heard that your best partner informed you of the divorce in a letter. Elizabeth is silent. Sophia puts her finger to her chin and says that most likely the former blonde had a reason to break up. Maybe he didn't like Elizabeth's appearance. The blonde opens her eyes wide and freezes in place. She didn't expect to hear that even from a girl like Sophia. Open images are the last thing that ladies allow themselves. Even the friends of the lady in red are shocked. Miss Sophie, how can you? Sophia angrily glares at the girl in green, telling her to shut up. There is silence in the hall. Elizabeth stands with her head down. Malfi, who could not resist the temptation to use the magic bullet, is indignant. This is a terrible insult. The man directs a devastating look at Sophia. That bastard is just jealous of Elizabeth. You don't often see Malfi so angry. The blonde bites her lip, trying to calm herself. The girl understands that if she answers anything to Sophia, she will only make things worse for herself. Where does her rival get so much anger from? Why does Sophia allow herself to say such disgusting things? Elizabeth does not know the answers to these questions. Sophia looks at the blonde and smiles evilly. She mentally asks the young countess to cry. The lady in red really wants to shame her rival. People in the hall turn their heads in the direction of the two young aristocrats. While nobody knows what to do, Malfi glares angrily. He cannot turn a blind eye to someone humiliating Elizabeth, but he also does it publicly. The man is about to intervene. However, to begin with, you need to find a person you can settle into. The gaze of the patron of happiness falls on a fair-haired young man with green eyes. It was he who helped the blonde in the market. The patron of happiness notices that this boy is surrounded by a divine aura. Not a bad option for the temporary shelter of God. Solved, exclaims Melpheus. I'll move in with him. The man presses his hand on the magic ball, which serves as a kind of portal between the world of people and heaven. That's why Melpheus values her so much. After a few seconds, the dark-haired man finds himself in the body of a young man. He opens his eyes and examines himself. God needs some time to master the new body. He directs his gaze forward. Elizabeth stands opposite Sophia. The latter is waiting for the blonde to somehow embarrass herself. The guests gathered around the young aristocrats are silent. Perfectly, says the guy. He is going to make Sophia answer for her words if none of the men present are able to do it. The fair-haired man approaches the young aristocrats. I didn't expect to hear such a thing from a well-bred lady. Sophia is shocked and displeased. She didn't expect anyone to intervene. The old man stands next to Elizabeth and flashes his eyes angrily. He considers Sophia's accusations to be groundless. In addition, they can negatively affect the blonde's self-esteem. Elizabeth looks carefully at the boy. His face seems too familiar to her. The girl wails and puts her hand to her mouth. The blonde recognized him. This is the same young man who helped save Trigger, she says in her mind, recalling that day in particular the greedy and cruel bread seller.
Elizabeth is surprised. She didn't think she would ever meet the blonde again. The other girls are also amazed. Duke Vanderbilt, so you have already returned from the battlefield.
The blonde freezes in place when she hears these words. Is the young man who recently helped her at the market a famous, fearless warrior, defender of the empire? The girl does not really understand why he stood up for her in front of Sophia. The guy feels the blonde's gaze on him and turns his head in her direction. The cheeks of the young countess are reddened. The young man notices this and smiles warmly at Elizabeth, trying to calm her down and encourage her. He really hopes that the blonde did not take Sophia's words seriously. Elizabeth looks very excited. Duke Vanderbilt's appearance, actions, and words made her forget the scathing remark of the jealous gossip. The girl cannot believe that the young man can smile so kindly. During the first meeting, he seemed to her a serious, sensible, and even somewhat cold person. Parabic touches Elizabeth's hand. What? Asks the girl. She does not understand what, and most importantly why, Duke Vanderbilt is doing. Maybe he wants to say something to the blonde or ask her to dance. But no, the blonde does not want to stay with Elizabeth in a hall full of cowards, gossipers, and fools. The guy offers the blonde to relax on the terrace. She agrees. Sophia looks at the couple with wide eyes. She can't believe that Elizabeth, whose boyfriends were all pathetic cowards, was protected by the Duke himself. The fair-haired man turns his head in the direction of the rival of the young countess and angrily says, As for you, I advise you not to offend Miss Elizabeth again. I won't be so polite next time. Sophia sinks to the floor. How so? Vanderbilt not only stood up for Elizabeth, but actually shamed Sophia in front of all the aristocrats. Sophia's friends are in no hurry to comfort the girl. This was to be expected. These girls supported the young lady as long as it was profitable for them. That's it, one of the ladies exclaims. She suggests that the real lover of Lady Elizabeth was Duke Vanderbilt. That is why all the past gentlemen broke up with the girl so quickly. Other aristocrats think about the young lady's words. "Indeed," says the lady in the open purple dress, "no man can match the Duke." Her friend mentions the fourth prince. However, few people take this young man seriously. He is definitely inferior in charisma to his courageous subject. The girls would not have discussed the heir to the throne so boldly if they had known that he was standing at the entrance to the hall. The fourth prince grits his teeth in anger. Elizabeth and Vanderbilt are standing on the terrace. "Thank you, Duke. This is the second time you've helped me," says the girl shyly. The young man is a little confused. Malfoy did not know that Elizabeth was already dating the young Duke. The patron of happiness suggests that this happened when Elderberry took the magic bullet from him. But less so. It doesn't matter now. God in the body of a boy should not behave suspiciously so as not to betray himself. The blonde says that he simply could not watch the girl being insulted. Elizabeth smiles at the boy and says that he is very kind. Not to say that the former blondes were callous pieces of bread, but they did not often stand up for Elizabeth. In general, such bravery is rare for aristocrats. Elizabeth folds her hands together and thanks the Duke a second time. She admits that she herself could barely contain her anger. The young man is silent. Now he is carefully looking at the girl. Vanderbilt's, or rather Malfia's, heart is pounding. God begins to realize how beautiful Elizabeth is. The dark-haired man was never deprived of female attention. Beautiful goddesses courted him quite often, but it never came to a serious relationship. Now the man feels that he has found the love of his life, no matter how banal it sounds. In addition, he has all the signs of being in love: rapid heartbeat, red cheeks, and unclear thoughts. Vanderbilt can't take his eyes off Elizabeth, and the girl notices it. She touches a lock of her hair and lowers her eyes. "Duke, you look at me so strangely." She is embarrassed to talk about it. That was how Vanderbilt looked at her that day when the incident with the boy in the bread cellar happened. Malfoy suggests that Trigger and the young Duke are somehow related. The old man smiles from the corner of his mouth. "It's amazing. Every time I look at you, I realize how incredible you are." The fair-haired man extends his hand to Elizabeth. The girl stares at the young man. Vanderbilt shocks her more and more. At first, he protects her in the market. Then he opposes Sophia. And now he almost confesses his love. The old man continues, "I can't stop looking at you." Elizabeth puts her hands to her chest. She had heard this many times. In the past, every lover of the girl told her a lot of nice compliments. But now everything is different. Elizabeth feels that the boy's words are sincere, unlike the words of many other aristocrats. They tried to simply approach the girl in order to kiss her as soon as possible. Elizabeth closes her eyes. She is covered by a wave of various feelings. Feelings are mostly pleasant. After a few seconds, Elizabeth smiles widely. This is exactly what she was looking for. Duke Vanderbilt is the personification of an ideal man in the eyes of a blonde. He is handsome, intelligent, sincere, and moderately romantic. In addition, his status corresponds to that of a young countess. The young man gently takes the girl by the hand. He did not expect such a display of feelings. Eh? However, the young man is also in no hurry to tear his palm out of Elizabeth's. He just looks at the girl with wide eyes. The blonde raises the young Duke's hand to her chest. "Miss Elizabeth?" asks a blushing Vanderbilt. The girl looks into the young man's eyes and also addresses him by name. Elizabeth asks the young man if he could become her boyfriend. "You said you couldn't take your eyes off me," adds the blonde in an innocent tone. The old man is silent. The girl decides to take everything into her own hands. "If that's true, why don't we become a couple?" Elizabeth says, and presses her lips to the Duke's. Malfoy is shocked. He didn't think it would happen so quickly. Frankly speaking, he thought of little at all except for Elizabeth's beauty and grace. But now he has no choice but to respond to the blonde's kiss. Suddenly, the young man opens his eyes wide. He recalls that Elizabeth did not kiss boys before. The blonde touches the fair-haired man's chest with her hand. The guy uncertainly puts his hand on the girl's waist. Malpheus realizes that Elizabeth gave him her first kiss. After a few seconds, the blonde released Vanderbilt's mouth. The Duke tries to say something, but it doesn't come out well. Elizabeth's kiss seems to have taken away his ability to speak. In the end, the girl looks up at the young man and smiles gently at him. Elizabeth hopes that Vanderbilt will take responsibility for what happened between them. "Responsibility?" asks the Duke. The guy feels confused. He did not expect such a turn of events. Vanderbilt, or rather Malfoy, seems to have a problem. Elizabeth smiles at the young man and tells him that he can call her Liz now. Previously, only the blonde's brother had such a privilege. After these words, the girl hurries to leave the hall. Parabok directs his gaze to his reflection in the window. On the one hand, he does not notice anything unusual. A kiss with Elizabeth did not change the Duke's appearance in any way. However, the issue is not in this, but in the fact that Elizabeth actually became close to Malfoy and not Vanderbilt. Only the girl herself does not even know about it. The guy frowns. "Devil!" he exclaims after a few seconds. Melphius is angry with himself. He had to drive the boys away from Elizabeth, but it turned out the other way around. The man clenches his teeth and flashes his eyes angrily. How can you be such a fool? Now Elizabeth will apparently be dating Duke Vanderbilt. The guy looks at his hands. The patron of happiness is about to send bad luck to the young Duke's body. The man is ready to do everything so that Elizabeth and Vanderbilt cannot be together. But Malphia is stopped by Elderberry's shout, "What are you doing?" Such it seems that the god of war has already returned to the friend's room. The redhead looks very angry. Malfoy is frantically thinking about what to do. On the one hand, if he didn't go back to heaven right now, Elderberry would kill him. On the other hand, he can't just leave the Duke's body. The blonde grits his teeth and looks up. Bad things. This is true. Frankly, Melphius is already regretting coming down to Earth. In the end, he decides to go back to his room. You can deal with Vanderbilt a little later. Now the main thing is not to anger Elderberry even more. Melphius flies into the sky and the Duke's soul returns to his body. Vanderbilt looks puzzled. He does not understand what happened. The room of the patron of happiness. Malfoy turned back a few seconds ago and sure enough, he saw Elderberry at his desk. The god of war sighs and says that this is also his fault. After all, it was the red-haired man who suggested that Melphief move in with some guy and confess his feelings to Elizabeth. The patron of happiness is glad that the god of war did not start shouting at him. "Do you even know who you moved in with?" Elderberry asks. Vanderbilt is not just a duke. He is revered as the guardian god of the empire. The redhead even blessed this guy. Malfoy, just pulling out a bag of demon dust from his pocket, says that he now understands why Vanderbilt was surrounded by a divine aura. The god of war pulls the man by a lock of hair. "Maybe in that case you won't bring bad luck to him?" asks the red-haired man in an angry tone. After a few seconds, he regains his composure. "Did something happen while you were him?" Melphius is embarrassed. He wonders if he should tell Elderberry about the kiss with Elizabeth. The dark-haired one is afraid that the god of war will scold him or just start laughing. After all, the man dares. He puts his hand to his forehead and says quietly, "Kiss." Elderberry is surprised. "Huh?" The dark-haired man can't hold back and starts screaming. "I was the one who saved Elizabeth from those rascals, and of course she thought it was Vanderbilt." Malfoy's voice is full of anger and despair. The man says that is why the blonde kissed the Duke. She was impressed by the boy's courage. "It's like I made these two fall in love with each other." The dark-haired man sighs loudly. It can be seen that he is very unhappy with himself, but you can't do anything. The redhead, who really feels guilty for his friend's misfortune, cautiously asks if he is familiar with the consequences of being possessed by God. The Supreme God told about this in his lectures. The dark-haired man waves his hands and angrily replies that he didn't attend class. Like, he has so many things to do. This is another lie. Of course, Melphius was missing lectures because of Elizabeth, not because of his busy schedule. Elderberry is not surprised. In short, some of your feelings for Elizabeth have been transferred to Vanderbilt. The dark-haired man puts his hand to his chin. He didn't know about it. Elderberry asks Malfoy if he understands how his action could affect the Duke's life. "So?" The man answers aloof. Malfoy notes in his mind that it is impossible to bring misfortune on Vanderbilt, a man blessed by the god of war. The Oslet family carriage leaves the imperial palace. Elizabeth leans her hand against the window. The girl looks excited. "What have I done?" The blonde feels that she did something wrong by kissing Vanderbilt without his permission. Such behavior could push the Duke away from the young countess. But Elizabeth couldn't help but do it. At that moment, she thought that fate itself had brought her together with Vanderbilt. The girl did not control her thoughts and body at all. White notices her sister's strange behavior. The boy asks Elizabeth if she has spoken to Duke Vanderbilt. The girl shuddered. What? Did Count Oslet see her with the blonde? Well, in that case, Elizabeth had better keep to herself so as not to arouse suspicion. So, the girl answers. White sighs. The Duke comes from a famous family, but he's a military man. Elizabeth frowns. Once again, her brother clings to small things. Then the appearance is not like that. Then the status. Now the profession in general. The girl flashes her eyes. So what? He protects the country. It deserves respect. White hurries to reassure his sister. I didn't mean anything like that. The guy says in his mind that he does not want Elizabeth to marry a military man. However, Elizabeth does not need to know about this. Otherwise, she will stop trusting her brother altogether. White squints at the blonde. He thinks about Duke Vanderbilt. The problem is that the military not only spills other people's blood, but also participates in dirty political games. And Vanderbilt is no exception to the rule. White believes that the Duke, who is struggling for political influence, will not be able to make a good husband for Elizabeth. It is unlikely that he will pay much attention to her. Emperor's palace. The aristocrats are still drinking, eating, dancing, and making merry. This will continue until the morning. Duke Vanderbilt still stands on the terrace. The guy is thinking about Elizabeth. The blonde can't understand why he confessed to the girl and then let her kiss him. He lost control of himself so quickly. The young man remembers how it all started. When he saw Elizabeth in the market, she made the impression of a brave and desperate girl, ready to fight for justice. However, the blonde behaved differently at this banquet. They stood with their heads down and listened to insults from Sophia, not even trying to defend themselves. Then Vanderbilt felt he had to stand up for the girl no matter what it cost him. The guy opens his eyes wide. I just couldn't do it any other way. Someone's steps pull the fair-haired man out of his thoughts. I told you to take care of Elizabeth, not to confess to her, says a man's voice angrily. The young man looks around. Behind him stands the fourth prince. After the incident with the young countess, the man decided to have a serious talk with his subject. Perhaps I am mistaken, Duke, he asks. Vanderbilt immediately got down on one knee in front of the dark-haired man and bowed his head. By no means, Your Highness. The Duke understands that communication with Elizabeth has caused him a lot of trouble. The fourth prince drills the Duke with a stern look. The dark-haired man broke up with Elizabeth a few months ago, but his feelings for the girl did not disappear. The fourth prince orders Vanderbilt to stand up. For now, the man is holding himself in his hands. First, you need to find out if there really was something between the Duke and Elizabeth. All the same, in case of which the dark-haired man does not want to lose such a courageous and skilled warrior as Vanderbilt. The young man obeys the prince's order. He exhales and says that he thought that the fair-haired one could be trusted, unlike the others. Vanderbilt doesn't quite understand what the man is talking about. He, without taking his eyes off the fair-haired man, begins to explain. When you returned to the capital, I instructed you to watch over Elizabeth. Before the Duke, several men had already done this. The tone of the dark-haired man is calm but very serious, sometimes even threatening. Vanderbilt listens carefully to the man. The problem was that after a week of tracking, every single one of the fourth prince's men had fallen in love with her. And for obvious reasons, the dark-haired man didn't like it. In addition, men in love simply stopped performing their tasks. They just stared at Elizabeth for days and did not pay any attention to what was happening around the girl.
The Duke wonders why Elizabeth cares so much about the fourth prince. The blonde, at his peril and risk, decides to ask him about it.
Huh? The man raises his eyebrows. He considers the Duke's question impolite and even insolent. Subjects should not interfere in the affairs of their leaders. Did you fall in love with her too? The dark-haired prince speaks openly because Vanderbilt will not understand otherwise. The blonde opens his eyes wide in shock. The fourth prince orders the Duke to answer. The dark-haired man flashes his eyes angrily. Although Vanderbilt is an excellent warrior, he is already starting to annoy the heir to the throne. The blonde's confusion betrays him. Vanderbilt tries to collect his thoughts. He grips the collar of his perfectly white jacket with thin fingers. After a few seconds, the guy says that he has no feelings for Ms. Elizabeth. Vanderbilt tried desperately to avoid eye contact with the prince as he spoke these words. I only did this to protect justice, adds the blonde, remembering how he told Sophia about politeness and manners. Also, a pleasant picture in which he leads a blonde to the terrace pops into the boy's memory. The young man gently smiled at Elizabeth and held her hand. The guests saw them off with surprised looks. The fourth prince notices the young man's dreaminess and guesses what caused it. The man is snoring. Of course. Sounds rather dry. The dark-haired man doesn't even hide his displeasure. He tells the Duke to forget about the errand with Elizabeth. What? Vanderbilt asks. The man says that the soldier will still be back on the battlefield right after the holidays. The Duke flashes his eyes angrily. The young man really does not like how the fourth prince treats him. Does the dark-haired man think that Vanderbilt is a robot that can fight without normal rest? You won't be watching her anymore, got it? The prince raises his eyebrows. The fair-haired man says that he understood everything. The fourth prince leaves. It is time for him to return to the hall, to the guests. Otherwise, the emperor will worry. The Duke lowers his head. The dark-haired man spoiled the boy's mood, almost accusing him of treason. But he also spoke to him as if he were some kind of plebeian. But now Vanderbilt is more interested in the attitude of the fourth prince to Elizabeth. The young man does not understand the course of the dark-haired man's thoughts at all. Why is the heir to the throne watching the countess? He is not interested in her anyway. At least that's what the Duke thinks. The boy even thinks about catching up with the dark-haired man and asking him about it. But Vanderbilt quickly abandons this idea. Several days pass. Malfay's room. Elderberry, in a displeased tone, asks his friend what he should do now. Because of the dark-haired god of war, troubles appeared. Malfay asks the redhead what he is talking about. Elderberry touches the magic ball. See for yourself! The patron of happiness stares at his toy. He sees a fair-haired boy sitting at a table and looking at the wall. The man quickly recognizes him as Duke Vanderbilt. What's wrong with him? Asks the dark-haired man. Elderberry almost explodes with anger. He perfectly understands that Malfay is just pretending to be a fool. The redhead says that some of Malfay's memories of Elizabeth were passed on to the Duke. Malfay puts his hands on the magic ball to see what information about Elizabeth has appeared in the memory of the blonde. A man sees a blonde eating chocolate. Nothing unusual so far. Then the picture changes. Malfay watches as the maids tighten the corset around Elizabeth's waist. The dark-haired man switches to Duke Vanderbilt. He looks depressed. Elderberry says that even he, the boy's patron, can see these memories. The red-haired man leans his hands on the table. The man who is called the god guardian of the country has locked himself in his office, hanging his nose. Duke Vanderbilt now reminds the redhead of Malfay himself. When the patron saint of happiness was obsessed with Elizabeth, he also behaved very strangely. Malfay pulls out a bag of demonic dust from his pocket and his eyes twinkle. Perhaps to bring misfortune upon him after all? Then he won't even remember Elizabeth. The dark-haired man jokes, but Elderberry is not at all funny now. You are still one of the top gods. Your memories cannot be erased so easily. Malfay says he'll take that as a compliment. The dark-haired man offers Elderberry to move in with the Duke himself. What? Asks the redhead. Malfay says that the god of war could share his memories with Vanderbilt. Then all thoughts about Elizabeth will leave the Duke's head and he can go about his business. You really didn't listen to the lecture? Snorts Elderberry. No man is capable of enduring the obsession of two gods. The fair-haired person's mind will certainly suffer. Of course. Malfay frowns. He does not like the fact that the blonde will continue to think about Elizabeth. About his Elizabeth. The redhead puts a hand to his head and sighs tiredly. Unfortunately, I have no choice but to leave everything as it is. The god of war admits that he is unable to control this situation. Anyway, it's time for us to gather. Elderberry sharply turns in the direction of the exit from the room. Malfay is surprised. Going? Where? Why? The redhead points to the scrolls. The patron of happiness completely forgot that today is the day to report to the supreme god. Melpheus stands up. Elderberry throws a towel over the dark-haired man's head. Take a shower, you smell. Yes, mother, says the man jokingly. The red-haired man is just as jokingly indignant. Malfay goes to the bathroom. A man does not really want to go to the supreme god and report to him. The patron of happiness is angry with the Lord for the fact that he expelled Elizabeth from heaven. The dark-haired man flashes his eyes angrily, and without explaining the reason to anyone, he believes that he can do anything. What a high opinion he has of himself. Vanderbilt Estate. It is a huge building with several towers and a blue roof. The Duke's secretary, Kamen, a man with glasses, asks how the Lord is doing. The maid and the butler look into the Duke's room and quietly tell the secretary that nothing has changed. Vanderbilt stares at the wall. After returning from the feast, he did not eat. The fair-haired man lost his temper. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. The boy himself already assumes that he has lost his mind. And the reason for this is Elizabeth. Vanderbilt met the girl only twice, but for some reason, random memories related to her keep popping up in his head. He sees how she wakes up, how she embroiders, etc. The boy puts his hand to his forehead and sighs. He told the fourth prince that he had no feelings for the girl, but then how to explain these strange memories? Someone knocks on the door. "Come in," says Vanderbilt. The secretary enters the room. "I'm sorry." Vanderbilt asks the man what happened. The secretary approaches the young duke's desk. "I'm worried about you. Maybe we should call a doctor?" The secretary's words about the excitement are sincere. In general, all servants of the estate love their master. The fair-haired man looks up at the man and says that everything is fine with him. His physical condition is normal. The duke has one question for his secretary. "I am listening to you," says the man. Vanderbilt folds his hands together and says that the image of the same person keeps popping up in his head. The boy wonders what this could be related to. "We are talking about Elizabeth,"